And welcome back. Well, of course, it's been more than 3 years now since Superstorm Sandy damaged or even destroyed tens of thousands of homes in New York State, with about a third of them on Long Island alone. Ultimately, more than 11,000 Long Island homes were deemed eligible for government help. But just over a quarter of those homes have received that financial aid. More than half, about 6,000 homeowners, are still waiting in limbo as they try to navigate, some say crawl, through a maze of government paperwork and bureaucracy. Joining us now to talk about this is Ann Dibble. She is the Storm Response Director for NILAG, that's the New York Legal Assistance Group. It's a nonprofit agency that provides legal help to the folks who've been living with this storm-inspired nightmare since October 2012. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And where do you think the recovery stands at this moment?
Well, more than 3 years after the storm, the recovery for many, many people is still it's still out of reach. There are many, many thousands of homes that are they're uninhabitable or they need major repair, and people just cannot get the funds that they need.
Yeah, we go to these homes as reporters, and we think nobody's in there, but they're up there on the top floor,
That's
living
right.
in a trailer behind, and they've been doing that for years.
Right.
How many clients do you represent, and how many have received the aid? How many have not?
Well, NILAG has represented people on Long Island as well as in New York City since right after the storm, and we've represented more than 10,000 people, slightly less than half from Long Island, so thousands of people. And we continue to hear from people to this day who need assistance just getting the recovery funds that they really need to get back in their homes and get their lives
That's
back.
a significant portion of the affected population. NILAG has been a big player in trying to get something moving forward here. There's a big shadow hanging over all this right now, this talk about clawbacks. Explain that to the audience, to folks who may not know what that means.
Well, a clawback in this context is when FEMA actually seeks its money back. So FEMA has provided grants to Sandy victims up to $31,900 under the Individuals and Households program. But FEMA can ask for its money back if they made a mistake or if they think that the recipient made a mistake.
Yeah, and we have learned, we've been educated. Now I think most people know FEMA. They know the name, at least, Federal Emergency Management Agency, the federal agency that is supposed to help people when these kinds of devastating storms occur. You know, there's a cap of $300,000 to $400,000 depending on your situation, and that includes money you might get from your insurance company, from federal flood insurance, anything you might have gotten from FEMA, anything you might get from New York Rising, you know, your private insurer as well,
Right.
and small business administration loans, which a lot of people didn't know when they took them was going to count toward this cap. They weren't really told that. And then they can claw back any amount if suddenly your insurance company gives you an amount that you've been disputing. Now that has to go back to the government. People are just losing their minds over this.
It's very distressing for people to get a letter now 3 years later when you're still suffering and still trying to recover, to get a letter from FEMA asking for its money back. And one of the things that's so distressing for people is it doesn't matter who made the mistake. It doesn't matter if you made a mistake or if FEMA made a mistake. They still have the right to ask for their money back.
Some of these folks have filled out paperwork a dozen times. They've had caseworkers change on them. Initially with New York Rising, there was a whole bunch of staff workers that they didn't feel were doing the job the way they wanted, and they went and got a different group of staff workers. Right. But that meant people now had to fill out their forms again and send them in. Meanwhile, there's an Inspector General's report from the federal government saying that FEMA actually overpaid even more than we're aware of. What about that?
That's right. We're very concerned about this. In October of this year, the FEMA Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General issued a report saying that FEMA did not have an adequate basis for verifying when people informed FEMA that they had no insurance. And they raised the specter that up to 29,000 Sandy victims could be subject to new recoupments or clawbacks. And this
recoupments.
Yeah.
These words are frightening. Just you got to go to the dictionary to figure out what it means. Basically, they want their money back.
They want their money back.
But, you know, we've seen the congressional delegation try to intervene and say, you know, look, these folks have put every dime they got in there. They didn't go to Vegas with this money. Forgive this, you know, this clawback. Yet there's been no progress on that, right?
There hasn't been. After Katrina, when there was so much devastation, FEMA, there was a lot of problems with the recoupments and the clawbacks issue, and there was a special law that was enacted that allowed people to seek a waiver or forgiveness. They wouldn't have to pay the money back if they could show that it wasn't their fault and they had a low to moderate income. But that law doesn't apply to Sandy victims. It was only for a very specific period of time, and it would be great if that law could be extended or a new one adapted for Sandy victims.
Well, and from a small survey, FEMA concluded that many insurance companies underpaid the homeowners for their claims, and yet because of this clawback issue, many people are reluctant to pursue that, right? Because they're worried they're going to pay an attorney, and then what, they're going to give back anyway?
Correct. There is a big problem with getting from one hand and having to pay right over to the other hand, and people, as you said, are sick of having to provide this information and start over and over and over again.
Well, here we are in 2016, and we're not going to give up following this, and we know you folks are on the job there, and everybody has good intentions here. We just hope that there can be a resolution that get people back in their homes. Thank you very much for stopping in. Ann Dibble, Storm Response Director with NILAG, that's the New York Legal Assistance Group. Thanks for updating us on the Sandy recovery.
Thank you for having me.